and welcome everybody. Much appreciate everybody coming tonight, or whatever time of day it is for you, wherever in the world you are. We're hosting this tonight as part of Clay Week, and just to give you a little bit of a quick rundown, Clay Week is an annual event that happens in October, and the main mandate, and Lindsay can jump in because Lindsay is one of our board directors. She's like, one of our board directors too, but the main goal is just to really bring people together and have these great conversations about clay, and sort of in an informal way where people get to ask questions, and it's just sort of a fun thing. And it's really what this whole week has kind of been about in a lot of ways. And this year is really special because of COVID. Everything has gone online. Normally a lot of Clay Week is online, but now even the open studios that we're having on the weekend, those won't be happening in person, they'll be happening online as well. So it's sort of like Clay Week was already prepared for COVID, just in the idea of how the idea came about to build this online event year after year. And so it's really exciting because this year has been jam-packed full of stuff and really packed full of Canadian content too, which I'm really proud of. And our crew at Make and Do have brought together a lot of that Canadian content. Part of this tonight's being hosted through Make and Do, so we appreciate that. And it kind of gave me an excuse to reach out to people like PJ, who I've been stalking online and whatnot, and just saying like, hey, I really need you to come out and do something with us, and get some more of your work out to a larger audience. So I'm really excited to have you here with us tonight, PJ. Thank you so much. And quickly before we begin, I'll just say I'm in Saskatoon. I know that everybody's coming from different places, but I just wanted to acknowledge really quick that I am coming to you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is actually Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Cree and the Métis nations. I'd like to recognize that it's the traditional homelands of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, Dene, and Saulteaux, and reaffirm that this relationship and there are responsibilities associated with that relationship, and that there is a commitment through this treaty that we all need to uphold, and that I myself put myself in that place of working on that as well. So I'm going to pass it over to PJ. I don't know if you're okay, PJ, if we've got a nice small group here, if we can have it be kind of informal, or if you want people to keep their questions till the end. How do you feel about that?
People can ask questions whenever they want. We're just talking about stuff, right? Play stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. So if anybody does feel shy, they can definitely put their questions in the chat, but I also encourage you to just actually like unmute yourself and pop in, because we're a nice small group.
Yeah.
So do you want to start with telling us a bit about your work, or you can tell us where you are in the world?
Well, right now I'm in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm at the University of Manitoba, and I'm in my brand new studio. I'm going to take this opportunity to show you guys my fancy space, because I just moved in and it's all pretty and beautiful. You ready? I've got myself my lovely little studio over here, my sofa, and this is the fun part. I've got my wheels, my shelves, some pots, some places to hang out and make things, and it's gigantic. And all of our studios are this size, so it's kind of fancy.
I feel like a couch in a grad studio is like a requirement.
It's the law. I mean, it was on sale at IKEA, so like I cleaned up. And it's not really made of real fabric, so it shouldn't get too clayey, I'm hoping, fingers crossed.
As long as you remember to go home over the next couple years while you're in grad school, not just sleep there permanently.
I promise nothing. I promise nothing. I occasionally have to leave because I teach classes other places, but the rest of the time I'm probably going to be here. Yeah, so I'm here. This is a long time coming. I graduated from undergrad, also from the University of Manitoba, almost just over 10 years ago. So like I was out in the wild for a while, making stuff and meeting people and trying to make better pots. So yeah, I'm going to show you a few things. I'm going to share my screen, if this works. There we go. There you go. Can you guys see?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Make it bigger. There we are. So these are some of the pieces that I've made over the last 10 years, and I only have a couple of them that are from school. Now this one here is specifically from last year when I started adding fiber to my work. So I started still making the coiled, burnished, and smoke-fired pots, but adding, you know, some woven paper because I thought it looked cool. Got quite a few of those. Yay. I also have some fantastic friends that have a photography background, which I find very helpful when you're a potter, because, you know, they're able to help take pictures for your work. This one right here is actually one of my more recent ones. I got a grant to go and study with Indigenous potters in New Mexico last year. So I spent the better part of a month in New Mexico and in El Paso, Texas, making pots with Indigenous people, learning how they do it, some traditions. And I happened to be in El Paso at a workshop during the Walmart shooting. So it was my first mass shooting, but I was in the States for a while. So yeah, it was very stressful for me personally, and it had nothing to do with me. I'm a poor little Canadian girl. I don't know how to handle these things. I just called my mom, but came back and was reflecting on a lot of my weaponized pieces. And I really started playing more with how these weapons have been really glorified and more of a status symbol than as something that is used to actually hurt people. So I thought I would work on some glorification pieces, and this is one of them. Yay! My regular stabby pots. I really like the idea of weaponized pottery. That is something that I've been working on for quite a few years. But more in the case of weaponizing things against people or places. These ones here, the ones that are very blade-like, are usually about either the way we are, well, not protecting our environmental resources in Canada, mostly water, land rights, those sorts of things. And so I really like making super spiky pieces. I have a couple others. This one right here is a water ewer, a pitcher that is so bladed that you can't actually get water out of it once it's in there. So it's been overprotected to the point that it's unusable. Kind of like, you know, the stuff that we sell to companies who take our resources, hike up the price, and then sell it back to us at ridiculous prices. So that's where I was going with those ones. Another one. This one's actually my favorite one. Super fancy, but along the same lines. Last year, though the year before last, the Winnipeg Art Gallery decided that they were going to be putting out a charity cookbook. And I've had stuff there for a few years. And Sherry, who is running the gallery, asked me if I could make some functional work for her to put in this cookbook. I, as a general rule, do not make functional work, but I put on my big girl pants and I tried really hard to make some functional work that still felt like something that I would make. So I started using smoke firing and slips to try and like capture what I really like about smoke in functional work. And I was able to find this really fantastic sealer. So the outside's sealed, actually from Australia, made in Australia. I know, it's fantastic. Super expensive to get from Australia. However, it's like $9 billion to ship, but I wanted to try it out. And it's fantastic magic stuff. So I've been using these particular pots for about a year and a half, and they're still great. So I'm working pretty hard on coming up with a functional series that is functional, but still very much feels like something that I would make, like something that's mine instead of other people's. Again, still playing with the idea of stabby.
Real quick, can you go back to the one you just went over and didn't say much about? What's the scale? I was wondering about that with the first spiky
This
pot.
one?
No, one more.
This one.
Yeah, what's the scale?
They're not gigantic. They're probably like small, well, not small watermelon size. Not like gigantic, but small. Keep in mind, like until recently, my studio was the smallest bedroom in the basement of my house. So I don't necessarily have the space to be making anything that's too large.
So when you say small, you're referencing like your head size, or what's small?
Small to me is, anything that's smaller than, hold on, what do I got?
Like a watermelon? Is that small?
Yeah, watermelon is about as big as I would get.
Okay.
Probably. I do have a larger kiln, but just keeping pots that are that big and carrying up the stairs and carrying up to the garage where I fire, and then carrying up to the backyard, like there becomes a point when size gives you diminishing returns. There's just too much risk in like taking it upstairs, carrying it outside. So I try to keep it well within something that I'm willing to carry up and down stairs 40 times or however many times I need to do. So watermelon is about as big as it gets so far. I mean, now I can do whatever I want. So
yeah,
I'm pretty excited.
You're in this beautiful big studio now. Are we going to suddenly?
I am very excited to make some gigantic stuff. One of the best things about grad school is that you can do things that you don't have the space, you don't have the time, you're concerned about like actually selling your work. Like, I mean, who's gonna buy like a 9-foot stabby pot? Like nobody's gonna buy that. Well, they might, but like, I don't know how I would ship it. But like just to make something for the point of making it and having it be amazing, so exciting. I'm so excited to do that. And I can. This is actually
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Dorothy is asking a question. Can you tell us a bit about what you're doing at the university? Are you faculty or are you a student?
I'm a student. I'm a first-year graduate student, and I'm a TA. All of us are guaranteed TA positions here, so it's pretty sweet. You have money coming in, plus the money that they give you for coming, which is also pretty sweet. You don't have to like freak out and have 900 jobs. No more selling spaghetti for us. But yeah, so it's actually pretty amazing. But just just a graduate candidate. It's going to be awesome. You go, another series that I did for a show a few years ago, I was just playing with shapes with the tops. I mean, I kind of really think of everything that I've done for the last 10 years as like studying, if that makes sense. I would go and spend time with South African Zulu potters or like indigenous potters of New Mexico, and I would learn different ways of making quail pots and burnishing them and making my surfaces do what I wanted them to do, and different ways of firing and applications and different ways of treating surfaces. And I feel like at this particular moment, like I'm pretty okay, right? Like I'm ready to move on to something else. These are all studies pretty much. Some of them are like pretty successful. This is from my show at my group show at the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery last year. I think that I've mastered, or not necessarily mastered, but I've gotten pretty okay with a lot of the techniques now. So I can start to really mess with them. I can just, you know, do things that are a little more unexpected because now, you know, I've tried all the things. I'm ready. This is the Magwaza family from South Africa. They're kind of a huge deal if you like South African pottery. They're like super famous. And I got to go to their village and go buy pots and then carry the pots home on my lap in the plane. It was really a really long time with pots on your lap, but it was a really great experience. And I highly recommend if you ever go visit the Magwaza family. They're fantastic. More random things that I've made. This one here is also from the Clay and Glass Gallery show last year, but this one is my hoodie pot. And this was, again, a weaponization. So these are things that have been used or weaponized, things that we don't think of as in any way violent, being used in a violent way, like the black hoodie is being used against Indigenous and Black people, usually men. And yeah. So that's my hoodie pot. It's got little hoodies. Mugs. More glorification pots. And probably my favorite glorification pot. I mean, it's just so pretty. It's so nice. It's like grandiose and gold. And it's also like, you know, guns. So read that how you will.
How big would the piece of
Martin.
that one be, though, that last gun piece?
That one is actually not small. It's like less than 2 feet tall, but only just. So it's like, it's a good size pot. The
guns
revolver.
sort of were referencing like an actual gun size almost then?
Yeah, they are molds that I made from toy revolvers.
Okay.
So they're life-size revolvers. Yeah, they're accurate sized.
Yeah, the thing that I think is interesting about that last one too is that's maybe one of the only times I've ever thought about guns as a tradition, because you have it with pots and with basketry. It's like in a lot of ways it's reframing this idea of the gun. Yeah, which this
And
kind
you're
of,
not wrong. Like, depending on where you're coming from, guns are very much a part of like your cultural tradition. So it's something that you don't necessarily consider as being part of who you are or your character, but in a lot of places, like, they're so prevalent and so common that it's just part of who you are. Like, I'm originally from up north, Thompson, Manitoba, hub of the north, and hunting is huge. It's huge. Almost everybody has a gun. But keep in mind that bears and wolves sometimes do come and like break into your garbage or garage. So it's a thing that people have, but it's a very big part of the culture that you have, because it's just part of keeping yourself safe there.
Is there a reason? I think the guns you've shown so far have all been revolvers or handguns. Is that a like, is that specific gun, is that a specific choice?
Yes, because I'm mostly thinking about with the glorification about the prevalence of murder of Black and brown people, how it's a really common thing, and we don't really consider it, well, until very recently. Keep in mind, this was like a year ago that I made this, before everybody was very aware of how big of an issue it was. But it was like a very big thing that everyone just sort of seemed to accept. You know, it was like every other day you would hear a story about somebody, you know, a child being killed because like somebody thought that they were trouble or that they had a gun or whatever, and turned out they were 13. Or, you know, somebody was shot in the back because they felt threatened. But, you know, you heard it all the time, and then you'd be like, oh, that's terrible. And then you would move on with your day. And like the next day or the next week, you would hear it again and again and again. And it was just something that grates specifically on me, because like I'm a brown person and I have brown family that lives in the United States, where it's a much more common thing than it is in Canada, although it's not unheard of here either. Yeah, it's something that just every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, that's another one, another one, another one. Like, how many is enough, right? So I've been thinking about our relationship with guns and with dead kids. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I don't really know how to have conversations about it without making something, because that's really how I have conversations with people and with myself. So this series, the glorification series specifically, is a lot about the relationship of guns and culture and glorification and death of young people, and yeah, a lot.
So a question, are these urns? Are they intended as urns as well, like the vessel form?
They're not necessarily intended as urns. I mean, if that was what somebody wanted to do with it, I feel like that would be an appropriate and not unreasonable thing. But I've never really considered any of my work for urns. I'm trying really hard. Like, I know that I reference death, but I'm trying to make it more about the life. Like, the people that are here can make changes rather than like memoriams. Like, I'm sick of memoriams. There's a ton of memoriams. I want something to happen before somebody dies, right? I want it to stop before that, ideally. Yeah. Does anybody else have a question about that one? No? This is one of my pots from my third year of university when I was still trying stuff out. It's one of my first pots that came out that I was like, all right, that looks pretty good. It's a coiled vessel with a hole in it. It's got a closed top, and it just came out doing exactly what I thought that a smoke firing should do. And I was really excited. It made me really happy. So this was one of my very first pots that I ever made. These would be the two very first pots that I ever made. Yeah, my very first smoke-fired pots that I did in my first year of university. I mean, you can see the progression. First year, third year, well after that, and like now.
And what
so
was
like
it
the
about,
last,
sorry, what was it about?
sorry?
What was it about smoke firing? Like, what kept you in that? And I ask specifically because, you know, in university, or there's like this weird thing with like raku and pit firing that, you know, so I'm just curious if you've had that issue within critiques, or like what it is. Is it that tradition that's also like kept you within that?
All right, this is gonna take a second. When I first started in university, it was like 2000, 2001. I stayed for a couple of years here, and then I moved to Toronto to go and do design school there, and then came back to finish my fine arts degree. So when I started, I was very interested in non-European or non-Western art, but we didn't have the teachers for those. Like, they just weren't here. We didn't have them. So I just was unable to study them. I spent a lot of my own time looking stuff up, and then went away and then came back. And when I came back, we did have a teacher that taught African art history, so hooray. So I was able to get that. I was able to get an Asian class, an Asian ceramics and Asian art class in, but we didn't have any classes that were about like Indigenous art. And like, there's a huge tradition of Indigenous art here. Like, it just baffled me that there was nobody that was teaching a class. We have one now, but we didn't back then. So I figured the one way that I could find out about more non-Western art was to go through the anthropology department. So I signed up and I took a bunch of anthro classes, and I studied like New World civilizations and New World prehistory, and I pretty much wrote every single paper about pottery. And I met a professor, Dr. Kent Fowler, and he actually was a ceramics specialist, and he specialized in study of ceramics culturally. And I ended up being one of his research assistants in South Africa studying Zulu pottery. So like, I kind of lucked out there. So even though when I was here, and it was very focused on Asian tradition of art, the wood fire of art, it was very like, wood fire, let's go and roast a cow in there. And, you know, it was kind of a thing that they did back then. And my stuff was not that. So I think, honestly, it was just like stubbornness. Like, I know that there's like a difference of opinion on, like, there's a hierarchy of ceramic goodness, value, right? Like, and there is, but there isn't.
It's a fake hierarchy. It's fake.
Yeah, it's fake, and it goes through phases, right? So sometimes some things are like very popular, and sometimes they're not, and sometimes something else comes to the fore. But people tend to have an opinion about smoke fire, pit fire, low fire, raku, and they kind of tend to see it as less. And I don't accept that. I think that's ridiculous. So I work really hard to make the most amazing pots that I can, and then have people like, how did you make that? I'm like, oh, it's low fire, smoke fire. No, turns out it's not terrible. Yeah, you can do it. It's a thing. So yeah, I just don't accept that. I don't accept that African art or African ceramics is less valuable than German. I don't accept that North American Indigenous art is not as good as Japanese. I don't accept it. I never have. And I've always been pretty firm about what I want to learn and how I want to learn it. I mean, I started by learning from archaeologists who, you know, they're great, but like they have a goal and they have a perspective. So I want to learn from actual people who have had this tradition. I want to be a part of that. I don't want to like steal their tradition. I just feel like I kind of missed out because I don't have like this long-standing family tradition of pottery going down like 8 generations. That's not fair. So I'm really happy that I get to spend time with people and learn about how their parents or their mother-in-law taught them how to make pots, and like using some of those techniques and like moving it forward, teaching it to other people, right? Like it doesn't have to be like a lost art here in Manitoba. I know that we don't have a ton of pottery anymore, but it's coming back. Like traditional Indigenous pottery is coming back here. And I am all about it. It's kind of a big deal to me.
So one thing that came up in conversation with Casey Adams the other day in another Clay Week event was this idea of the word traditional being attached to this type of work as well. And she was sort of, I'm going to really poorly sum up what was said. It's a really good conversation and it's on our Instagram feed, but just this idea of taking that work out so that we can recontextualize. And I noticed for quite a while that you didn't use that word. You talked about, you know, European tradition or what have you, but you weren't talking about this type of smoke fire as traditional work. And it was really powerful, I thought, to hear Casey talk about it in that way, of not sort of segregating it into this area of just like, well, it's only traditional and therefore there's nothing contemporary happening with that. And I see your work very much as being an incredibly contemporary approach to these processes with very contemporary subject matter as well. How do you feel about that word though?
Traditional?
Yeah.
I think that it applies in a lot of ways. I really like learning from people that work traditionally, that are not necessarily trying to, you know, make contemporary pots, but they're making like the historical family pottery that's part of their culture and it expresses an aspect of their people. And I like learning techniques that they are using. When they're making their pieces, a lot of times, especially in both South Africa and in the American Southwest, a lot of the additions, like the incising, the carvings, the painting, those are sacred to their families. Like they're very important traditions within their families. And I would never use those. Like that's none of my business. It's like, that's not mine to borrow. But the actual techniques of how they make things, how they apply slips, how they, you know, burnish, how they, like the actual techniques, those ones I feel pretty safe borrowing. So I'm taking like a tradition and I'm taking actually multiple traditions and I'm kind of bringing them together and I'm expressing them in a way that feels right to me. So it's my work that's borrowed the history of certain things without actually borrowing their history, certainly not borrowing their stories, if that distinction makes sense.
Absolutely. Because
their stories are their stories and my stories are my stories. And I'm telling my stories, not theirs. Yeah. So it's a fun line because like I'm a Jamaican, Canadian, Métis person. So my mother's side of the family is Métis, Scottish Métis actually. Fun story. Many people know about us. We're a thing. And my father's family is Jamaican. So like on both sides, I have this culture where their cultures were stolen, like pretty much. Like the Indigenous side, we all know how residential schools work. There's a lot of things that we lost there. And on my dad's side, like I couldn't even tell you what part of Africa our family is from. Like I couldn't even guess unless we did DNA. So like those are parts of their culture that, you know, like for all I know, I am from a grand tradition of potters. Who knows? Not I. So like we don't have access to these parts of our culture. So my going and finding Indigenous potters to learn from or finding African potters to learn from, sort of like a way to try and find a connection to the tradition that I don't have. You know, I know it's not my people and I know they're not my traditions, but like in the absence of a tradition. You kind of got to do what you can, right? Like if that's something that you feel strongly about, and I do. So I think kind of my story here is a little bit of a Canadian story. Like there's a lot of us in Canada whose families have been here for a while, who have kind of forgotten like that, you know, their family came from the Ukraine and they left the Ukraine because of the famine like 150 years ago, and people were dying, and like there's murder and mayhem, like Russia and all this stuff. But like a couple of generations and you don't really remember that story. You just remember the pierogies, right? Like there's things that you remember and things that you don't. So everybody has the ability to do what I do. They could do it too. It's just a lot of people choose not to because, you know, you could, you know, just throw things in the gas kiln and have fun. Yeah. It's just different ways of looking at things, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This right here is more of the work from that show at the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery. And the one in front is actually the one that references the relationship between the queer community and the police, which has not historically been great. When I had made this was right about the time when the police were uninvited to Pride, mostly because of the lack of apology and acknowledgement of the bathhouse raids and the harassment that was happening all the way up until the 80s. Like it wasn't that long ago. It was pretty recent. And we had a serial killer that was killing gays in Toronto. And there wasn't a whole lot of action. There was a lot of like finger pointing and saying like, oh, well, the gay community is not talking to us. And like, well, why aren't they talking to you? Well, because you guys kind of harass them a lot. Like there's like this really bad relationship and history of a relationship. And it kind of exists with a lot of police and a lot of people right now. We're kind of acknowledging that. And Canada is not exempt. Like we have our own issues, and not just with the gay community, but also with the Black community, like the Indigenous community. It's a real problem. It's a real thing. Another one that I had over there was the yellow vests. That's something that was fun and used to mobilize against people. That one was interesting, and they're still around, right? They were really vocal last year, but I haven't really heard anything about them in the last little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know, did they like just join the QAnon group or the anti-maskers?
Maybe.
I don't know. I just sort of assumed that they were.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it also like the Black Lives Matter movement in Toronto? Wasn't it at a Pride festival in Toronto that they actually stopped the entire parade and had a in protest there? And like Trudeau was like, "Oh, I'll talk to you," and they're like, "This isn't about you. Move along. This is about us and like the queer community in Toronto needing to do work to blend better with that community as well." Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's right across the board. I mean, we've had our own protests here that have been pretty fantastic, and they've been for a couple of years that they show up in not Black Lives Matter specifically, but Black Space Winnipeg is one, and they're an amazing group and do lots of really good work trying to make sure that people are aware of Black artists and their contributions. So there's a lot of good work at pushing really hard for acknowledgement, because it's not like I'm the only Black potter in Canada, right? But like I couldn't name one besides myself. Like I don't know anybody. I live in Winnipeg. We do have like a fairly okay Black community, but I don't see them in art school. So where are they? Like, this is a problem. We need to like make sure that we're getting lots of different kinds of people in universities and part of the academic system, so we can move forward and then have like really diverse rainbow of everybody, you know, learning and teaching and working together. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. Any of it, really.
And have you felt in Canada like there is any progress with that, or do you feel like it's still a lot of words and not a lot of action? I mean, I think the call this year has really come out and forced people to address things. in a way that they didn't have to before. They knew it was happening and they just sort of were able to keep quiet. And there's a lot more with call out culture and what have you. But do you see things turning into action yet? Or do you feel like there's a lot of lip service?
No, I feel like that there is a very vocal minority who keeps me on edge. Like I still receive like random hate mail to my Instagram, you know, like just random stuff. It happens. And that's what you get for existing in brown skin. Like it serves me right, I guess. But like there's a vocal minority, and then there's a lot of people that are, you know, really trying to do the work. And it's hard work. It's not just one day being like, oh, I have no more biases, we're done. It doesn't work like that. Like bias is something that's like super ingrained and unconscious, and you can't fix it until you acknowledge it's even there. And nobody wants to admit it's there because bias is seen as so terrible. And like, no one wants to be like, oh, I'm not a bad person, so I can't have a bias. It's like, well, no, you can be a good person and have a bias. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be biased. Like society made you like this. It's just the system. It's not you personally. It's just we need to work at seeing beyond the veil of the system. It's set up in a certain way to favor some people over others, or to slightly discriminate against some groups or others. It's like when you're in a business meeting and there's a woman who's arguing her point, and you think in your head, you're like, well, she's bossy. Is she? Or is she assertive? Like if a guy was doing the same thing, would you call him bossy? I don't think you would, right? So that's a bias that we just have ingrained in us from the time we're little. And it's a ton of work to see that and go, oh, she's bossy. I'm like, nope, those are leadership skills. Like you gotta train yourself to say it all the time. And it's hard because it shows up out of nowhere and everybody has them. It's a lot of work. And I'm really excited that a lot of people are trying and they're working really hard to make the world a more welcoming and safe space for, you know, people like me and gay people and trans people and Indigenous people and women. Like that's fantastic. But there's some people who really hate us. And that's not ideal. Like, I'm not going to hide from it. Like, I know that they exist. And I just, you know, have a little folder of all of the hate mail that I've ever gotten in case I get murdered, so the police have somewhere to look. But there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it. You can either just hide and be at home and never do anything, or you can just say what you think needs to be said. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm doing my best to learn as much as I can and make sure that I'm teaching and working and doing my best to make sure that everybody has a chance to know what I know. Not that I'm the authority on all things, but.
With the hate mail, do you feel like there's a place for you to report that, or do you feel like that's a personal?
Oh, you can report it. You can report it. Like that's whatever. You just report it. But I mean, it's.
But it doesn't feel like anything happens.
Well, I mean, maybe they get blocked, but they just make a new account, right? Like it's. Yeah. It's just the lawless wilds of the internet, and that's just the way it is. Like that's just how it exists, and that there's no way I'm the only one this happens to. I mean, it happens to everybody. I'm sure like some of you women have gotten some questionable emails that you've had to put aside. That it's just how life is right now. So.
In terms of the reception of your work, say more in a gallery space then, I mean that sort of is a different space than a social media space. How is the reception of this type of really strong messaged work? How is it received there? Are you finding that there's is there any negativity there, or is it because it's a different type of space, people are more reserved from speaking their stupid minds, for lack of a better word?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've often found is that with my work, people tend to see what they want to see. So I've never really been present for any like real like backlashiness. However, when I was at the opening for this particular show, I had somebody that was taking pictures with my pot, and I was so excited. I'm like, oh, someone's taking pictures with my pot. So I went over and I'm like, hi. I'm like, so do you like this work? And like, it was the Toronto police one. And the girl who took the picture is like, yeah, I'm actually going into police academy in a month. And I was like, great, bye. You know, like, clearly like she was taking something away from that was completely different than the intent. So I've never actually had somebody that's come up to me and like yelled at me or gotten into a conversation at a show, but not one of my shows. But I think that's also fair to say that art tends to skew liberal, like very liberal. So we don't like, it's very rare that you'd find an artist that would openly say those kinds of things publicly, right? Like it's not, I mean, I'm sure it does happen, but it's less likely than if I was, I don't know, in like business or finance or something. I don't know. I just assume that people that make money have arts, but that's just, no, maybe?
Yeah, I think also pots are so abstract that a lot of times like what people are getting from a pot is very different. Like it's such an abstract form. Even students that are studying ceramics, you know, you can have two people in the same critique looking at the same vessel and they're going to say wildly different things about it.
And I kind of like that. But at the same time, I kind of hate it too. I mean, I really like that you can interpret a lot of things in a lot of different ways, but I'm kind of stressed out about like some strong misinterpretations. Like I remember when I was in undergrad and I was in painting, like I would paint people that were brown because I am also brown. And I would have people to say my work was about black on black violence and about abuse of black women by black men, like just like, whoa, 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 slow down. But like, that is a possible way of interpreting stuff, right? It's possible interpretation. Whereas it's just like, well, no, I just painted brown people because like I'm also brown. It has nothing to do with the content, but it always will, and it always does, right? So like the things that I reference, because it's coming from a place of a Black and Indigenous woman, that's always the baggage that's going to be carried with my work no matter what. So like, it's always going to be coming from that direction. And I'm trying really hard to make my messages that surround the work be something that reflects my feelings on those kinds of topics. Like it's always going to be coming from my perspective with my bias. And I try to be pretty overt about it. So I really hope that people don't misinterpret my work and say, oh, like she's being homophobic. And I'm like, no, I'm actually not. Like this is a pro-gay pot or whatever. But yeah, once I'm done, like I'm not in control of the pot anymore, right? Like it's not my baby, it's their baby. So somebody else is going to be talking about my work after that. So I try to do the best I can to make it as clear as I can. But again, people are going to take away what they take away. Yeah.
Marnie, did you want to jump in? You had your hand up a second ago.
Yeah, I was actually curious, back when we were talking about how your work was seen in galleries, I was wondering with the communities of people that you've learned the techniques from, whether they have seen what you've done with those techniques and then if they have, what their response has been to that.
Well, the first time I was in South Africa in 2010, and we were working with rural Zulu potters that were like in the middle of like their reserves, so very far away from anything. And I brought my portfolio to talk about the stuff that I was doing and why I wanted to learn from them. And yeah, my pots don't make sense. They just don't. They make like they make beer vessels, they make traditional gourd vessels for cooking. So like my sculptural vessels that serve no actual purpose, they're just like, well, like it's well made, but what does it do? Like, why would you do, you know, it just, yeah, They're just like, I guess it's nice. It's just super good. I don't know what it is, but it's fine. Yeah. It was baffling. They thought it was ridiculous and baffling, which is fair, which is fair. Because you can't make beer in one of my weird stabby pots. Like, it's not going to work.
Oh,
sorry?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
When I was in New Mexico, I did show some of my work to some of the people that I was working with. Yeah, and they're like, yeah, like you're all right, you're cool. They knew like what I was doing and kind of stuff that I was into. But there's a much bigger cultural difference between like, you know, Santa Fe, New Mexico and like rural South Africa. Yeah.
And so have you had like in the sort of contemporary African art scene in South Africa, has your work been taken up in those places? Like there's like places where people are doing, who are African, are doing
absolutely
high art or whatever you want to call it.
On my second time in South Africa, I actually was artist in residence at the University of KwaZulu Natal. So I shared studio space with the graduate students, and they were fantastic. We went and visited galleries in Durban and in Johannesburg. Like, you know, it's pretty happening scene. Like, there's a lot going on in South Africa for ceramics and for art in general. Like, amazing work. So, like, I have shown, and yeah, I mean, I feel like our work, their work and my work were analogous, I suppose. Like, a lot of people were working in like porcelain, and there was some people that were making strong references to like cultural traditions, like Clive Satoli. He was also there around the same time. He's pretty fantastic. He's at Mud Flat right now, doing a residency there. If you ever have a chance to look him up, please do, because he's super cool. And he was using, he's a quail and burnished potter, and he strongly references like traditional Zulu pottery, but in a very contemporary way. He actually studied with Magdalena Adundo. So she's like a huge deal if you're into quail burnished pottery. Okay, cool. I like it when people know who she is because she's amazing. I still not met her, someday though. But yeah, like there's people that are working contemporarily as well as people that are working super traditionally. It's kind of fun in Africa, well, in South Africa specifically, because you have like these large urban centers, which could be any urban center anywhere on earth, right? Like it could be in London or Shanghai or anywhere, because it's like phones and cars and trucks and buses and subways and whatever. And then like drive for like 2 or 3 hours through like the mountains, and like there's no running water, there's no electricity. You might have a solar panel so you can charge your phone, you know, like that's the level of like technology's just amazingly different depending on how far away or where you live. It's yeah it's quite jarring, very jarring, but
Cool, thanks.
Oh, no problem. Did I answer the question?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
I feel like I talk a lot, but I don't really remember what I say. Oh, these are fun. These are some of my pieces before I smoke fired them. So you've seen some of them after they've got the smoke on them and how they kind of become much more muted and have like much more depth to the surface. And this is what they look like before the smoke, and they're pretty gaudy. So yeah, people are often surprised when they see the before and afters because, you know, they kind of, yeah, they're not as pretty before they're fired. Still shiny though. Probably one of the best pots I ever got. I don't know how I got it. So yeah, I have no idea how that happened. It'll never happen again. Sigh. And I think that's all of them. Does anybody have any other questions or anything that you want to know?
I'm really curious about what is going forward in the future for grad school, what you're thinking about doing. And I know you're new into it and whatnot, but I mean, you're there now, right? So I'm curious where you see your work going over the next little while and where you want to take it and what you're looking at exploring, I guess.
Well, since I have access to everything I can ever dream of here, I am actually working on some figurative sculpture. That is, yeah, I am going to be, hopefully, knock on wood, working on some figurative sculpture that involves weaving and fiber, and is going to be pretty much exploring aspects of culture that we were talking about right now. How there tends to always be this sort of backlash to any sort of like social moving forward. There's always like this group that's like, no, that's terrible. I mean, we've seen it throughout history. It's always worked that way. And yeah, I'm kind of interested in exploring how that kind of backlash always happens, and like how, like, does it ever really go away? Does it just go dormant? How does it show up again? Like, what ignites it each time? So that's what I'm interested in working on. And yeah, figurative. Always wanted to, but you know, never really had time. And like, who has sculptures of things? Nobody. That's not a thing. I need to have more clay, and people buy pots, so I make pots. But I don't have to now. I can just do whatever my little heart desires and do something weird and unexpected. Yeah, try something different.
Do you think you'll try different surface treatments and stuff as well, or?
I always kind of have. I do like use a lot of terrassage and burnishing, but I also use like some glazes and wax, and there's the fiber and graphite. Like I tend to use lots of different things to make a finished piece. So I think now I'm just going to keep doing that. Like, when I was an undergrad, I always sort of tried to find a clay solution to every problem. You know, like if all you have is a hammer, every problem is a nail. Well, all I had was clay, so I had to solve everything in a clay way. But once I graduated, I came to realize that sometimes, you know, the best tool for the job is something else. You can, like, you don't have to just do clay. You can do whatever you want. What are they going to do? Take away your birthday? No, try weird stuff. So that's when I started adding wax and fiber and graphite and trying all the different things. So I want to continue doing that, and maybe even push the envelope a little more. Maybe even fire something to like cone 5. I know. It's crazy sauce.
If you start
right now,
firing stoneware, I'm going to get in the car though and come.
Oh, I've done it before, but like ages ago. I don't think so. I mean, I'm willing to, like, you know, do some wood kiln chips or something, but not necessarily put anything in. So I'll help because it's cool and it's fun. But yeah, it doesn't really do it for me on my work. Not so far. We'll see.
I was just wondering, that occurred to me an artist that might be interesting for you to look up, just your discussion of Black bodies and doing the figure, but she's a vessel maker, Ashlyn Pope. She's a Black artist, and she's currently artist in residence in Lawrence, Kansas. And it made me think of your work because she also sort of incorporates rope, but ceramic rope, like braided ceramics, into her work, and it's sort of all about the Black female body, but through vessels. So it occurred to me that could be interesting for you to.
I will definitely look her up. I'm always taking suggestions. I mean, it's only been like the last, like 8 or 9 months that there's really been this like push to like show who these Black artists are, these Black potters. I knew they existed because like we're not unicorns. There had to be other ones. But until like this whole thing started going on, I've gotten to follow so many amazing potters that I did not know existed. And I know they were probably like, well, I know there's other Black potters somewhere, but I don't know how to find them. So now we all like have at least seen each other's work, and we can talk about it and say, oh yeah, try so-and-so. Like that's just, it's So nice to know that there's other brown people that make pots. So nice. Yeah, I like really enjoy it.
So Dorothy's got another question for you. What's your experience with shipping your work? Does work at this temperature present any specific challenges with regards to shipping?
My work is terrible to ship, especially since we stopped having Greyhound run through the center of the country, which is rough. Yeah, it was probably the most affordable way of getting pots from point A to point B, and actual humans touched it. So if you had like fragile, they would actually like be careful with it. I've never had a problem shipping through them, but I've had a problem shipping with almost everyone else. So at the moment, when I have to restock my stockists, yeah, I'm just gonna have to find a friend who's going out there and send them with a box of stuff, because like, yeah, most of the shipping that I have used like are extremely expensive and not overly careful with your work, and you can't insure ceramics. So yeah, it's not ideal. It's not ideal to ship, especially since my pieces tend to be like on the larger side. It's not like shipping a mug where you can like, you know, put it in a decent sized box. I mean, if you have like a 2-foot pot, then that suddenly means that you need like an 8-foot box to be able to make sure that you've got the padding all the way around it, right? So yeah, shipping's a nightmare. I don't like doing it.
PJ, could you maybe share with us some of the places that folks can see your work or purchase your work?
Sure.
I can put it in the notes here, the chat.
Sure. I'm at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba, which is in Brandon, and the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery right now.
So I have a question, I guess. I'm sort of trying not to jump in here and be too chatty, but I have a million questions because I'm a huge fan.
Sure.
So COVID aside, I mean, residencies have obviously, and travel have had a really big impact on your work and research and whatnot. So COVID aside, what would be your next dream place to go and do some work and research?
I have always really wanted to go and explore pottery in Central Africa, mostly like the Central African Republic. It has been incredibly hard to travel there, even for like archaeologists to get in like the last, I don't know, 50 years or so. So I'm hoping for the day when like peace breaks out and everyone can go in and just go and hang out and see pots, because some of the collections that you've seen that are in like, you know, Belgium and whatnot, don't go to that gallery, that museum, by the way. Yeah, like the work is really awesome. I've seen like great books that have had it in there and had some of that work. And I'm really interested in seeing if there's still a tradition that is happening, or if like Civil War and whatnot for the last however long has really put the death knell in the whole tradition out there. But Central Africa is something that I've been huge about. There's also a fantastic potter in Australia that I really would like to go and hang out with. She's made in Australia. She makes smoke-fired functional pottery. She's super fun. Yeah, she was giving a workshop in Bali actually over spring break that I was really hoping to go to, but you know, there's a thing. Maybe you've heard of it. So that got canceled. So I'm hoping that some other time I'll be able to go, because it was in Bali. It would have been so fun. Oh, that would have been great. But yeah, mostly I wanted to visit other countries in Africa. I've never been to South America, and I know they have some really fantastic pottery traditions down there, especially in central, well, northern South America, Central America. They have some really great black-fired pottery, which is kind of cool, and I'm really interested in that as well. So Australia, Africa, and South America. Those are where I have my heart set.
That's a good wish list. I like it.
Yeah, we'll see. We will see. If I have like some, you know, good excuses to go, then maybe someday I'll get a grant and visit. Because mostly I do most of these on grants. I go on claycations. Yeah, they're awesome. Like go and do some workshops and study and like travel at the same time while you learn things, and it's awesome. Highly recommend it. If you're, you know, in Canada. I don't know how it works anywhere else, but here it's pretty.
Well, I'm really looking forward to as well, hopefully some writing coming out of you over the next couple of years in grad school. Just the history that you have, and the, you know, you were talking about the people that you studied with and the anthropology and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I think that's one thing that's really lacking in Canada is a lot of really good critical writing about craft. So nudge, nudge.
We'll have to see. We're spending a lot of, I've been doing a lot of reading so far, and I've realized over the last 10 years, I have locked myself away in my little clay box where I only talked about clay and learned about clay, and I've completely ignored the rest of the art universe. So there's a ton of stuff that I need to read up on and be able to talk about. So yeah, a lot of reading. There's a lot of reading.
You got time
to catch up. Doesn't feel like it. I feel like, I know
I'm joking.
A month, I already feel behind.
Yeah.
Already feel behind. I mean, like it took a little bit for us to actually get in because like of the way the campus is set up this year because of COVID. But now that we're here, everything is working out so far. Cross our fingers.
Is it a 2-year or 3-year program there?
This one is a 2-year program, but it runs all year. So like I'll still be here in the summertime making stuff, thinking about stuff, and probably still reading more like critical art theory from the last. Juliana is just like, yes, you will be. Juliana's another grad student. She's the 2nd year. You guys can see her. It's really nice. But there's a lot of us this year. Quite a few. It's going to be a good year, I think.
Super exciting. Dorothy just wrote another note. She has to leave and she apologizes. Another Zoom meeting waiting. Love this presentation. Thanks for organizing talk, and thanks PJ for such beautiful work. I think if there's no other questions, we might end on that. And I'll add my thanks to that as well. This has absolutely been so lovely to get to know you a little bit more in person, but also to really hear a lot more about the narratives behind your work. It's been really eye-opening, and I've always seen your work as incredibly powerful, and more so now. It's, you know, it really has sunk in another level with me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up with over the next couple of years. We'll be paying attention.
I hope to see everyone again. Thanks for coming and listening to me talk.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you all for coming, and make sure to check out, there's still more Clay Week events happening all the way until Sunday, so there's plenty of open studios to pop into. The whole schedule is up on the clayweek.org website, and if you go to Instagram, you can follow Clay Week on there as well. And Make and Do is making sure that we highlight all the Canadian content that's coming up. And Marnie McDermott, who's here with us tonight, has also got a studio visit this weekend. I can't remember which day, Marnie, you'll have to tell us, but that's definitely worth checking out as well. But thank you all so much for coming.
Thanks so much, PJ. That was great.